Hi, I'm Arielle Feger, Senior Analyst Media Content at eMarketer. I'm excited to be joined today by Heidi Waldusky, Vice President of Brand Marketing at Quad.
Thank you so much for having me, Arielle.
Thank you for being here. To start us off, at Advertising Week New York, industry leaders are gathering to talk about the future of brand and consumer connections. From your perspective, what trends should marketers pay the closest attention to as we look ahead?
I love Advertising Week for this very specific reason. You know, marketers come out of the summer and we're all kind of in a race to the end of the year. So it's a perfect time. Something like Advertising Week really grounds us in what should we be looking at? What are the trends that are happening? What's the consumer behaviors we should be paying attention to? And at Advertising Week, we're going to see a lot of things around AI. Obviously, it's inevitable at this point, but I'm also encouraged that we're seeing a lot of conversations around the importance of brand and the importance of connecting to consumers. There's going to be a lot of talk about Gen Z and Gen Alpha. In terms of like, how do we connect to them and how do we really build that brand loyalty? Some of the trends that we're seeing, you know, we recently fielded some research earlier this year with the Harris Poll to really get to some of those consumer insights and behaviors in terms of like, what are they looking for from brands? And one of the trends that we're really seeing pop is this sort of shift in consumer behavior that they're more in charge of their omni-channel experience than ever before. And I think that's going to be something that's really exciting, and I expect to see the conversation building from that.
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing a lot of what's old is new, right? We're seeing
Exactly.
return of the catalog, return of digital cameras, a lot of different things that are happening. So I agree that it's like a new way to think about the physical experience, which is fun. How should brands respond when consumers are essentially co-authoring this story? How can they work together?
One thing I think is really important to remember about co-authoring is it simply just means that consumers are no longer just a passive audience to your advertising marketing messages. Not that that was necessarily ever a bad thing, because I think it was a real form of entertainment. But now we're seeing consumers really participate in the brand stories. We're seeing them make their own content. We're seeing them influence directions that brands go in. I think it's really important for brands to pay attention to and see where consumers are going, how they want to shape your story, and pay attention to how brands or consumers are talking about your brand online. If I think of a really great example, I think of the recent example of the Gap ad with Cat's Eye. I mean, come on, that's been incredible. And so when we think about co-authoring, I mean, I couldn't pass a TikTok video without someone doing the milkshake dance. And I think when you compare something like that to the American Eagle's Cindy Sweeney ad, you know, where Gap is going, they understand the importance of that co-authoring. They're taking it all the way from the digital space to the in-store space, where I think if you look at American Eagle, is it true to their brand? Is that a co-authoring moment, or am I simply advertising to my consumer set? And I think it's an interesting thing for brands to think about.
I've personally loved seeing all of the Cat's Eye dance videos from the Gap commercial and seeing people make it their own, again, adding their spins, adding their takes. And I think it really is just such a great example of a brand kind of working together with consumers, giving them that room to then take it and run, which is really, really fun. People are scrolling while streaming, skipping ads, unsubscribing more often. At the same time, compelling storytelling, consistency still do break through. How can marketers build stories that resonate across fragmented channels?
If we want to reach consumers across channels, it's really important to remember the totality of that experience and not look at the channels necessarily in silos. It's important for us to respect what's happening in those channels to make sure we're serving up the right things, but what's the complete experience that I'm offering the consumer, and understanding where their heads are at. We're seeing from the research that millennials and Gen Z, 81% of them like, gosh, I wish it was easier to disconnect from my device. And that's not a nostalgia thing. They don't have the life experience to say like, I remember when. They're tapping into a psychological need for, let me just put this away a little bit. But that doesn't mean that they don't necessarily want to connect with brands. They want it to be in a more meaningful way. And I think it's up to us as brands to say, how can I offer some entertainment to my consumer? How can I delight them? And there's brands out there who are doing that really well, who are getting back to some of their brand DNA. I think we're seeing a lot of return to what used to make a brand, and they're digging into it a little deeper, and they're building that story across channels to make sure that wherever the consumer is connecting, that they're able to find the brand, feel good about it, connect with it, and hopefully share it.
You've said consumers have strong BS detectors. How do you think brands can reinforce trust when it's so easy to lose?
For brands, I think you need to be transparent with your consumer. If you want to talk about a brand that knows the power of content marketing, look at the NFL. and I do, you can watch any number of documentaries, series, all the things. Like, I don't want to just watch the story about the quarterback, but I will watch a 30-minute thing about the guy who handed out the water at the Super Bowl 25 years ago. Like, I will engage with that content just as much as anything else. There's also the fan experience. Now, granted, they have a million resources at their disposal, but if I'm a brand, I'm looking at that and saying, what lessons can I learn in terms of how they're trying to connect with their consumer and the things that they're offering and the partnerships that they're building? I think there's some really good lessons there in terms of authenticity and intentionality.
The NFL is a great example of giving consumers value everywhere, right? It's not like we're just trying to sell you a jersey or a product or a ticket. We are giving you inside access to the athletes, to the stories, to the magic that makes the NFL. So I think that is a really, really great brand example. People are craving in-person experiences as well as digital ones. Why does offline matter more than ever now?
We have all been held hostage by this little rectangle in our hand for the last 20 years. And I think when the iPhone first came out, and other devices like that, it was such a novelty and it was super fun. But over the decades, that novelty has worn off. Now I have to do everything with my phone. And as marketers, we need to remember that as much as this wonderful device has shaped how we interact with the world in many extremely positive ways, offline behaviors matter more than ever. People are clamoring for a return to in-person. We have to remember consumers are human. There are emotions that drive them, needs, psychological things that, we can really dig deep into and understand that consumers want to connect, not just with each other, but with the brands, with the things that they are making part of their lives. And the research is showing us that it's not just in-person experiences, but it really is that offline component to that omni-channel behavior. So going back in store because I want to have an experience and I want to see the products in person and I want to try them out. We're seeing in the research how important that is. Dick's Sporting Goods is a great example of this. They're allowing consumers to be part of that. They're allowing them to try out products. They, I think, understand that their role in the consumer experience is an important one, and that they can bring that together and drive that. So, and the research is supporting that. They are saying, I love this. I want to do it. I'm willing to stand in line for it. It's a critical part of how I engage with brands and actually builds more loyalty if I can have that, which is really exciting to see.
Yeah, I really like the point you just brought up of the individual brands within a store could be doing these things, but I think the power of Dick's Sporting Goods creating a experience within their store is that it builds their own brand loyalty.
Exactly.
And it makes, a consumer want to go, I gotta go to Dick's to pick up a new basketball versus going online or anything else. It makes them want to go there.
Exactly.
Versus buying the brand somewhere else where they could go.
Marketers are kind of against the wall in terms of like proving ROI constantly, but I think Nike has been a good example of returning to brand. They had their first Super Bowl commercial in like decades earlier this year, and the CMO readily admits like maybe we flew a little too close to the sun in terms of performance marketing, and we want to make sure that people understand that we're for athletes, not algorithms, which is a great quote that she had given to Fast Company, and that's really important to remember, and I think we can all take a lesson from that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, that's a wonderful note to end it on. Heidi, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it was such a great conversation. Today's interview was made possible by Quad. Thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.